gacha games have blown up in the modern age. Nearly unrecognizable from their old monster collecting roots, the release of Genshin Impact has ushered in a new wave of gacha hype, as well as new eyes, more players, and more money flowing than ever before. Games have more graphical fidelity, and more budget, and production value than ever seen in the past. Hell, until 2021, it was extremely rare to see even 3D models or worlds in mobile titles, and open worlds were entirely out of the question save for the occasional MMO. Today, companies like MiHoYo, now known as HoYoverse, have revolutionized the way gacha games are seen in the commercial space, as an actual strategy of income, not a mere niche sector of mobile gaming. We've also seen a shift of developers new to genre, like Project Moon, known for their Library of Ruina and the Body Corporation games, entering the market, as well as widespread support of cross-platform play, arriving with the prevalence of emulation. This has, however, resulted in many changes to the formula that may feel difficult to adjust to for the older fans of the genre, or even difficulties with the modern gacha landscape that may have you wondering what's wrong with modern gacha games. Firstly, however, introductions are in order. I'm Nyala, also known as Foxclaws on social media and Mythical Victini on other sites. I was first introduced to gacha games with my first mobile smartphone with Brave Frontier on Windows Phone back in 2014. With the release of Windows 8, Microsoft had also released their own mobile OS, and its mobile game collection was abysmal. Brave Frontier was the only game I ever played religiously on that device. Since then, I have also played many other games, including the entire HoYoverse suite, and Kantai Collection, Azure Lane, Girls Frontline 1 and 2, Fate Grand Order, both the Japanese and the English version, Punishing Grey Raven, Wuthering Waves, Reverse 1999, Roundhouse 2, Nikkei, Bang Dream, Project Sekai, Blue Archive, Arknights, and so many others. I've also been around long enough to have played many end-of-service games as well, such as Taho Danmaku Kagura, Alchemy Stars, Crash Fever, and the previously mentioned Brave Frontier, and its sequel. In the following segments, I'll be analyzing the differences between older games and modern games through their application of fun, and rating them based on how they implement their features, as well as how those very features either improve or decrease the amount of fun in their games. Firstly, however, I'll be defining the idea of friction, which I consider to be the opposite of fun. Now, this can be applied to the average gacha game in several ways, but let's consider the most important facet first, friction. When players interact with a game has to ensure the most cleanest and fluid transition into the game and its various systems as possible. The way I personally interpret this idea is with a simple statement. It is more important for a game to not bother the player than it is to actually be good. I don't say this to discredit any facet of the game that might be well done, but to emphasize the point that if a game is annoying, then it doesn't matter how good the rest of the game is. The player will still be at risk of leaving for every annoyance. For instance, two gacha games can be virtually identical in every way, but if one game has loading screens between every menu, the other will become more popular just by act of convenience. This applies to many other mechanics, mostly QOL, like auto battle, as well as responsiveness of menus or controls. Friction also correlates with how many players might play a game. It might not actually cause someone to quit, but it will change how they decide to interact. For instance, I mainly play Honkai Star Rail with the controller, for the ability to stop time by holding a trigger. This allows me to think about things between individual character actions. For the direct opposite reason, I never use the controller on Genshin Impact. This is because the Genshin game never allows you to use a D-pad for menus. This makes me resort to using left stick in the pause menu, which is really garbage. This sense of friction is one of the main reasons a gacha game might miss out on a player base or revenue, as if a player experiences too many annoyances, they may become less receptive to marketing, and might even quit the game altogether or go on a hiatus. An older gacha game would generally have the advantage in the field of friction, mainly because it's had longer to adapt to the player's concerns, or the players have had longer to adapt to the game's quirks. In this next segment, I'll be taking 3 games, an old game, a modern game, and something in between. For each game, I'll separate it into several categories: dialogue and writing, hype, immersion, and gameplay. For each of those categories, I'll be rating the game out of 10 based on how fun I think each facet is. As for the older game, I have selected Fate Grand Order. It's nearly a decade old at this point, and its main selling point is its story. When someone recommends the game to you, it's generally due to the stellar writing. This is to be expected, as the franchise was initially born from a visual novel. But even so, it remains very clear that the game initially started as a cash grab licensed game, especially when playing through most of the first main story arc. The main advantage this game has in terms of its writing is the way it structures its prose. By ensuring that the dialogue is generally not a pain to read, and ensuring that each character speaks with a prose unique to them, it ensures that the player remains immersed in the dialogue and invested in the story through each character's speech patterns and quirks. The scores for writing and prose, for me at least, are 9 and 8 respectively. It's not so gripping that even a casual person would spend hours reading, but it is interesting enough that anyone with a mild interest in the subject matter might actually be absorbed into the dialogue. Fate Grand Order, as a primarily visual novel-driven turn-based RPG, has a hard time exhibiting hype. It can be interesting and exciting at certain moments, but generally speaking, hype isn't really a thing I would use to describe it. The CGs are artistically impressive, and the trailers on YouTube are also extremely hype-driven, but because those trailers are on YouTube, I can't exactly include them in my rating for the game itself. The CGs are still good though, so I will give the game a score of 4 out of 10 in the hype department. As a menu-centric game, Fate Grand Order is not really that immersive, and only players with experience with literary works would have experience and the ability to immerse themselves in the dialogue. There are attempts made at immersion, with story integration into battle dialogue, and certain enemy interactions through buffs and debuffs, but that can only do so much when the gameplay looks like this. 4 out of 10. The gameplay of Fate Go can be described as both deep and annoying at the same time. With it popularizing the insane buff stacking mechanics many fellow games adopt in the modern era, most contents generally orient around charging character ults, and then stacking all the buffs you can onto your main DPS in order to deal maximum damage. The strategy might change based on who you have in the party, or what gimmick the enemy utilizes such as regen or guts. Combat typically boils down to the formula I just mentioned. There are additional strategies though, outlining a form of meta through which the players define as chaining. Through strategic exploration of the various systems within the game, players find ways to continually activate ults over and over, or maximize strength of crits. Access to more advanced methods are however locked behind the gacha like Castoria and Koyanskaya, and unless you manage to pull certain characters, your access to endgame content is severely throttled. Even with access to such services, material farming is extremely manual and tedious, as well as based on archaic RNG mechanics. Grinding for materials to improve units becomes quite tiring. There are also other ways people have circumvented the lack of auto battle though. Quirks of being an old and popular game. The rating I'll give Fate Grand Order on its gameplay is 7 out of 10, since it's serviceable for a game of this caliber, and since I'm not really incorporating the gacha itself as part of the score, I'll only ding 1 point from the total. It also popularizes a very foundational combat framework that many turn-based gachas work off as well. As for the modern era of gacha games, I think the best to use is Hoyoverse's flagship title Genshin Impact. You could call Genshin Impact the harbinger of the modern era of gacha games, as well as the catalyst for the gacha market boom. Introducing many new people to the genre, as well as creating a whole new online culture surrounding the games themselves. Genshin Impact lately also profited from the timing of its release, as an open world with fantasy elements served as an excellent escapist paradise to the pandemic-stricken populace. As for the ways Genshin Impact properly meets my definition of fun, I find that many vocal people have spoken about its issues extensively, so I'll mainly outline the major issues in this segment. Obviously, Genshin Impact's world is extremely vast, and the game frustratingly is very fond of presenting more questions every time we get new content, and as such is very difficult to rate when it comes to the clarity of its story. It isn't helped by the fact that most characters speak in the same sentence structure, and also just exhibit generically likable traits, leaving them to mostly be pretty-looking exposition machines. Every cutscene and dialogue section is mainly exhibited with stock poses and generic character animations, which wouldn't be as much of a problem if conversations didn't take up nearly 2 to 3 hours of every quest, resulting in people becoming bored or spamming through the dialogue. I know I do. Another point against the writing is that the fact that there's no cutscene or dialogue archive, meaning that there is a minuscule to no chance of any skipped or summary function. It isn't all bad though. The world of Teyvat houses a great number of mysteries, which allow it to maintain a strong grip on people who are interested in the world building of the game. The main issue with such a strategy is due to the nature of the way the game updates content. New mysteries are created upon every update, and with so many questions and theories floating around, the revelations need to be adequately interesting in order to warrant the existence of the mysteries themselves. With the way the game's going right now, and the way the path has been traveling, I'm not totally sure the game can really deliver a satisfactory answer to all the dominoes it's set up. To err on the side of caution, as well as docking points off of the game for black screens and low effort in personalizing the character's speech patterns, Genshin Impact scores a 7 out of 10 on writing and 4 out of 10 on prose. It's just so hard to read so much when it all looks the same. Hype is hard to measure in Genshin Impact, especially since it mainly orients itself as a more vibes-oriented experience, with most of the best moments being when you can immerse yourself in the world as you explore it. The most hype moments in the game are the few full animated cutscenes that appear maybe once or twice per main story quest, or at the ends of the character story quests. And even then, the hype isn't always guaranteed, as the game isn't really intended to impress the player with high levels of hype, can't exactly fault it, and the lack of hype moments doesn't really have an impact on the level of fun I have when playing the game, so I suppose it's only fair to give it a 5 out of 10. The hype that it has is serviceable for the type of game it's trying to be, but it wouldn't hurt to have more hype moments in the game, just generally. Immersion is the one place where Genshin Impact excels the most. The rating is self-explanatory, 9 out of 10. Here's a montage. Gameplay is the easiest factor to apply the theory of friction to, since it's the easiest to analyze. Artifacts are a stupid gameplay mechanic that exists only to inflate playtime. The gamepad controls are nearly unusable due to the inability to use D-pad menus, and so on, but I feel the most annoying thing about the gameplay to me is how most casual combat encounters boil down to a generic combat input of mashing the attack button, using the skill when it's up, swapping, and using the skills of other characters, then swapping back to your DPS to use the ult. And any variation is just party-oriented, and barely changes in reaction to the enemy's actions. There's no reactivity here. Another thing I have difficulties justifying is the way the game seems to actively work against the casual gameplay style, with most gacha currently locked behind endgame modes while also preventing easy improvement by forcing active gameplay in every resource or artifact stage, making repeatedly challenging the same dungeon boring. If there was a ZZZ-esque way to randomize the enemies in any domain, or maybe spend all your condensed resin at once, maybe I'll be more forgiving, but as of right now it just feels bad to grind in Genshin Impact. While in a game like Star Rail, I don't have to actively oversee every resource stage. Once I'm actively confident in the power level of my team, I can just auto-battle the rest of the time. In Genshin, however, you have to enter a dungeon and fight the exact same number of enemies in the exact same positions over and over and over again, in the same configuration. In the same way, all while personally engaging with the game, resulting in fatigue and eventual burnout. The only way this monotony is alleviated is with the field resources, like the flowers and such. But as soon as you've done one, circle around the region to gather materials, it quickly becomes boring to circle the route once the materials reset, resulting in the same outcome as before. If there was another way to instantly complete a domain or send characters out to collect the materials, like an expedition, it would make it so much easier and also help people to devote their precious time on the game with actual exploration, not the grind, which is the worst part of any gacha game. Any competent gacha game will minimize the amount of grinding you have to do, or minimize the amount of player investment into the grind. So if you're grinding, the player will usually be able to auto their way through, and thus spend more time playing the real game. I rate the gameplay a 4 out of 10. The game has the funds and manpower to make the process of growing a character more painless, but it seems to refuse for purely the reason of wasting the player's time. Arknights is a game which meets my criteria for an in-betweener, or a game that exhibits properties of both modern and older gacha games, especially since it was released on the cusp of the explosion that was Genshin Impact. It takes a lot of the modern mechanics such as treating XP and materials separately from characters, and combines them with older traditions, such as each character mainly being represented with a single 2D splash and a chibi, or restructuring stages around gimmicks or mechanics instead of stat checks. This is also reflected in other parts of the game, but let's save the analysis for its respective sections. What can I say? It's obviously good. The world is fleshed out to an unreasonable degree to the point where it almost feels like reading an actual real history textbook whenever I try to read the archives in the game. It reinforces this feeling too by using real-world locations and cultures as reference to not only reference, but build off of, creating believable, solid cultures that feel cohesive yet different. The story is extremely complex and hard to understand, but if one has the patience to read, it's remarkably interesting. With plot twists and recurring characters, it also helps that every faction, of which there are many, has agendas that oppose and correlate with others, creating the illusion of a living, breathing world. This helps with its nature as a live service game. Writing gets a 9 out of 10, as even with everything going for it, the story can come off as intimidating to newer players, just due to the sheer depth and complexity of it. Just watch the Supa video in the description. It boils down mostly to using 50 words when 10 will do the job. That, and the fact that every character speaks with a prose that likens them to a philosopher, always spewing their personal ideas about the world they live in. It does alleviate this through a couple methods, however. These methods include, but are not limited to, showing the player's CGs during intense scenes, or utilizing its very good discography to its advantage. Overall, the prose of Arknights earns a 7 out of 10 from me. It's clearly not great, but the story's sheer quality allows anyone who is seriously engages with the writing to become obsessed. Arknights' method of building hype is quite similar to FGO, in that most of the hype is in the promotional material. This includes the ads, social media, and usually the PVs on the YouTube channel and other sources. The main clear difference between them in terms of how they drum up hype is the OST. Arknights boast a modern style of OST featuring many different genres, as well as many of such songs being vocal-centric, resulting in a form of hype FGO's primarily orchestral themes cannot match. Arknights also has an advantage in that the gameplay operates in real time, meaning that in a pinch, a player has the ability to make quick, skilled decisions in order to turn the situation around, resulting in a hype moment for the person playing. Despite these advantages, it is still primarily a strategy tower defense game, which means that the actual hype one can actually derive from it is generally not on the level of some contemporary action gachas like ZZZ or Aether Gazer. It also suffers from being a visual novel in the same way that FGO does, and as such the final score for the hype is 6 out of 10. Better than I would expect out of a tower defense, but still relatively low. Arknights operates with an interesting framework for immersion. Because the character you play as in the game operates in the same role that the player does as a strategic commander, this means that most UI elements and gameplay components are framed in a way where they could be explained as in-universe objects, and thus immersion is increased. Due to that, and the fact that the gameplay is mostly in real time, the game props up its inherently non-immersive format as a top-down tower defense, creating a form of pseudo-immersion that performs well when the player is suspending their disbelief. Arknights scores a 7 out of 10 in immersion, points off due to the difficult prose and being a visual novel. Gameplay is probably where Arknights most excels. As a tower defense, each unit is unique to an absolute extreme. This is augmented by the deployment limit, which forces players to think about what units they have on the field and how to balance DP generation early in the stage. With the ways many units operate, players are encouraged to think on their feet and manage not only the operator's various abilities, but also the many gimmicks that appear on the stage, maximizing utility. The game also encourages players to adapt to enemy types and variation by modifying the team, as well as swapping operators out as the stage progresses, further increasing player creativity. Arknights earns a 9 on gameplay with 1 point off from the lack of some utilities, as well as a slow mode which many players circumvent by using a pause exploit. Here are the final scores, totaled up for your viewing convenience. FGO with 32, Genshin Impact with 29, and Arknights with 38. This places Arknights in first place as the most fun, and FGO in second place. Genshin Impact is in last place, nearly a full 10 points behind first, as the least fun of the three. Now is this fact? No, it's all opinion, my opinion. But do observe that Genshin Impact put all their eggs or all their points into the immersion basket, while Arknights evenly spaced out its quality. Also observe that Arknights has a greater value than Genshin Impact, even when it came out before Genshin Impact. That's not even mentioning Fate Grand Order, which came in second. My theory is that Genshin Impact spread itself too thin, and expended all its resources on the gigantic open world, which prevented resources from being allocated to other parts of the game. Another theory is that Genshin Impact, as a trailblazing game in the genre, mostly operated as a proof of concept when it first released, and so stuck with playing catch-up later on, missing features many gacha games already had just due to the difficulty of implementation in the open world format. An additional consideration to make is localization, and the downsides of its popularity. As an extremely popular game, as well as one of the biggest exports China has had in recent years, at least in terms of pop culture, the CCP likely has an eye on the content of the game, and as such writers are restricted to mainly favor Chinese themes, or at least themes that don't orient against the CCP's agendas. Secondarily, the characters' dialogue might suffer from localization issues, especially when the online community is so vitriolic that basically every character has to be a milquetoast level of nice or generically good, with less wiggle room to write extreme characters, thus lessening magnitudes of any peaks or lows in the game. Thusly, I conclude that according to my own biased opinion, modern gacha games' problem are that they 1. Bend too easily to the whims of the fandom, and tend to refrain from distinct character traits that might make a banner character unlikable. They also seem to suffer from their success, as the more prosperous the game is, the more eyes are on it, which leads to difficulties in managing how to develop the game systems under such scrutiny. Additionally, they seem to exhibit most of their issues most clearly in the beginning of their lifespans, leading me to the following conclusion. The problem with modern gacha games isn't that they're modern, it's that they don't learn enough from their predecessors. Hey there, post-editing Yola here, just here to talk a bit about the video you just watched. As my first major video project on YouTube, I figured I should talk about what I plan to do with videos in the future. This one was more of a spur-of-the-moment project, so there's not, there's a lot of loose ends and holes in the script I never really addressed. As far as my plans for the future videos goes, I'm going to probably talk about those things, or at the very least try to fill them in with more research and more scripting, more videos, as well as maybe go over some more specific instances and comparisons between specific games, as well as framing them through the casual and competitive lens, because I forgot to do that for this video, and I don't really have time to change it now. That is, of course, if I make more videos, because even though this video is super fun, super great to make, it took a lot of time to just do all this stuff, and frankly speaking, I might not have the time for it in between classes, so we'll see where that goes. I will be streaming when I have when I feel like it, and I'm still going to be posting stuff to Instagram next, formerly known as Twitter, so we'll see how that goes. I do want to make more videos, so if that happens, great for me, great for you guys. As for what their videos are going to be about, I'm probably going to do like a comparison between how gacha actually affects games, probably comparing to Elden Ring and Genshin Impact, or why Genshin Impact has all these problems when similar games run into few or into less, and what kind of problems are inherent with the gacha system and stuff, or incorporating gacha systems into games, so that. And a real quick statement for Genshin fans who might feel a little, sad that I nagged on the game so much. I'm genuinely not trying to do any hating or anything. I play Genshin almost every other day or so. I'm AR 60. I've completed basically every world quest or arcane quest. It's I'm caught up on the game's content. I watch their YouTube channel. Frankly speaking, I love the game. So if I ever, if you think I hate it, I don't hate it. I love the game. And the one reason I'm so hard on it is because it's got so much money to do stuff with. They make so much money and they have so much income, and they have so many players, loyal players, that I feel like they could do better to just try and, do better with their game and develop better. So, that's just my take on the things. A few couple special mentions about my inspirations. Red Nacio, Psyche, and Lunar Equinox, and a couple other channels. I'll probably reference them in future videos. A lot of them inspired my current editing style. And yeah, so go check them out on YouTube. Yeah. But yeah, make sure to like and subscribe if you liked the video, obviously. And, just give me some ideas. I'm completely open to whatever you guys might want me to do a little more research on. And frankly, I just want more opportunities to get more content out there. Yeah. See ya.